Okay, so I was gonna ask you to give me your definition of mental health, but I won't because you're eating, and I don't wanna be the waitress that come and ask how is the food while you take a bite. So, mental health is or emotional, psychological, spiritual, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And it's not just the absence of a mental illness. A lot of times people think, oh, I've never been diagnosed with any mental illness. I don't have depression, I don't have anxiety, I don't have borderline or bipolar, so my mental health is good. That's not always the case. Our brain is pretty amazing. Our mental health is determined by how our brain functions. We don't often think about how our brain controls all our actions and our minds and our body, but understanding this makes all the difference in how we prioritize our mental health. So, to discuss mental health, we need a basic understanding of how the brain works. Our brains are composed of billions of tiny cells that we call neurons. And Marina touched on so much of my presentation, I wonder if she was looking at my PowerPoint. So these neurons are connected via electrochemical impulses, and through these connections, our brain directs all the actions of our bodies and our minds. So things that we're aware of, like moving or talking and laughing, eating, and then things that run in the background, so breathing and digestion and temperature control. Even our thoughts and our emotions are a result of neural connections. Our brain does its work in two ways. First, it creates a neural pathway for the things that we do most often. You can think of these things as habits, because neurons that fires together tends to wire together. Have you ever gotten to church and realized that you don't remember how the drive or to work and don't remember how you got there, like the drive to work? That's because you have created a strong neural pathway for driving to church or driving to work because you do it so often. And then secondly, our brain also releases neurotransmitters each time a neuron fires. Neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers of our brain. And so if you think about when you hold a baby and that feeling that you get when you hold a baby, what's actually happening is your brain is releasing some of those feel-good chemicals that promotes connection and bonding. And it's the same is true if you're worried about, let's say, a job performance at work and you're constantly thinking about that, your brain is going to produce some stress chemicals to prepare you for danger. It's almost like it's telling you need to get ready to run up from a saber-toothed tiger. When we think about mental health, we want to think about mental health being on a continuum. So first, we have changes in our mood, in our thinking, and which result in changes in our behaviors. Then we have these result in changes in or making daily activities really difficult for us. Hence, we have impairments in our work, in our interactions with friends and family, and just fulfilling major life functions. For many of us, we can decide to increase our self-care or change our diet, change our lifestyle, or even visit our primary care doctor and they prescribe some antidepressants and we're doing better again. What I want you to remember that as these symptoms, or as you move across the continuum or your symptoms increase, you will need more excessive care. You need to seek excessive care. So the problem with seeking care is that there's stigma around mental health. And a lot of people suffer because of the stigma associated with mental health. We often, a lot of times, we've come a long way when it comes to mental health, but we still have a further way to go. Oftentimes people who struggle with mental illness, especially severe mental or serious mental illness, they're seen as lazy, sinful, criminal, or dangerous. And we know this is not always the case, primarily because you're diagnosed with a mental health condition. So, the problem with stigma. People are slow to seek treatment. I don't want to get any mental health treatment because I don't want people to label me. Or so they sit and they suffer in silence, and silence is lonely and debilitating. And when you sit and not get treatment, the illness worsens. And people experience unnecessary suffering when treatment really works. Mental health issues are more common than we think. These are statistics from National Alliance on Mental Illness and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, NAMI and SAMHSA. And it says here that 1 in 5 Americans experience mental health issues each year. 19% of those diagnosed with anxiety, 8% for depression, and then another 8% for substance use. And the lifetime prevalence is 50%. So it is very common. We just don't talk about it because of the shame associated with mental health, or sometimes it's just a lack of information. We just don't know. And so we don't really talk about it. We know that the pandemic made everything worse. It really did. And for a lot of people struggling with mental health, it disrupted the services. But it also did draw attention to mental health and encouraged a lot more people to seek treatment, seek services. Women and youth were mostly impacted by the pandemic. So during the pandemic, we had depression and anxiety increase by 25%. Overdose deaths increased by 28%. This does not take into consideration those who survive overdose. And when you think it, and then excessive drinking increased by 21%, a lot of people lost family members and friends. They lost their jobs during the pandemic. A lot of people were home alone, isolated. And so you can see how mental health issues and illnesses increased during the pandemic. And this statistic is from the World Health Organization. So we're going to look at a very common mental health diagnosis that we're all familiar with. We're going to use depression as an example. And I want you to start thinking about what depression looks like for you. Again, I won't ask you to tell me because you're chewing. But think about what you imagine depression to look like. And so we're looking at different faces on the screen, and you'd probably look at one or two to say, yes, those individuals look depressed, and that one does not look depressed. The truth is we can't really tell if someone is struggling with depression just by looking at them. So we have to do a little bit more digging and investigation and observing some of their behaviors to determine if they're struggling or not. Or ask, how are you doing? And really mean it. A lot of times we ask, how are you? And we ask in passing. So we didn't even stop to hear the answer. Really asking people, how are you doing? And stop to listen to hear what they have to say. So on the screen, you're looking at a brain scan of a brain with depression and a brain diagnosed depression and a brain that is not diagnosed with depression. So the orangish yellow that you're seeing here is it typically indicates brain activity. And people with depression lack the neurotransmitter serotonin that Mirena talked about earlier, which is needed for neurons to fire. A neural activity during a depressed episode is suppressed. So if you look at the brain without depression diagnosis, you see a lot of activity going on, a lot of yellow and orange in the brain. And then the depressed brain rarely have any activity going on. So serotonin is suppressed during that time, so we don't have a lot of neurons firing. You can see how this might result in someone feeling less happy or low energy or just difficulty getting out of bed, isolating themselves, or just feeling like they don't care anymore. And then if you translate that into everyday life, think about your interaction with someone who's having this experience. How are they going to interact with you? How can they be productive when their brain is literally sick? So, the bottom line is mental illness is a brain disease in its mildest or most severe or serious forms. So mental illness and physical illness should be viewed in similar fashion. You can have a mild case of COVID, or you can have a most severe case that requires hospitalization. And it's the same thing with mental illness. We wouldn't make fun of someone who's diagnosed with cancer or diabetes. So we wouldn't want to make fun of someone who's struggling with mental illness. We would make a comedic movie out of someone who's diagnosed with, from the story of someone who's diagnosed with mental illness and with cancer. And so we wouldn't want to do the same thing for people who are struggling with mental illness. There's no single cause for mental health diagnosis, but we know that there are some contributing factors. And so when we think about early adversities, and hopefully I'm supposed to do another presentation and I'm gonna focus a little bit on trauma, but we talk about early adversities like abuse and neglect, weakness and violence, DV in the home, a family member going to prison or jail, some biological factors, environmental factors, the use of alcohol and drugs, and then some spiritual factors. All of these things cause changes in the brain. And most mental health illness have a genetic component, meaning that they can be passed down. However, whether or not someone is or winds up with a mental health illness, it just depends on that very complicated relationship between genetics and their life experiences. So if you think about someone who has diabetes in their family, your mom or your dad was diagnosed with diabetes, and if they eat a high sugar or high carb diet, they're likely probably going to end up with diabetes. And it's the same thing with mental health. If you have a close relative who struggles with depression or anxiety, and you have some of these life experiences, then you're probably likely going to struggle with depression at some point in your life. So, what does it look like? Some of the symptoms that you will see on a daily basis. Sometimes there's some tension between friends and family with the individual involved. There's sadness, fatigue, poor physical health. Studies show that people who struggle with mental health illness often just doesn't take care of their health. They don't have the motivation, they don't have the energy to do it. So they often struggle with physical health complications as well. So there's strain on the marriage and different relationships, decreased productivity, irritability, social withdrawal, misuse of substances. A lot of times you can't tell which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it because of the substance use that results in a mental health condition, or it's because of the mental health condition that drive people to use substances? If you think about a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, a lot of times they're hearing voices and they can't determine what's real and what's fake. And to suppress that, they'll go to alcohol or they'll use illicit substances to kind of drown out some of those voices that they keep hearing. So, if you're worried about someone in your family, church family, and you want to talk to them about what's going on because you're concerned, you might wonder how you might do this. First, we want to say, show support and empathy, and offer to help, and really mean it, and let them know that you mean it. Assume that they're struggling, because a lot of times we see people and feel like, yeah, they're fine, they'll be okay. Assume that they're struggling, and if you know someone that you really love and care about and they're struggling, you're not going to just let them struggle on their own. You're going to try to offer some help. Do not assume that they're deliberate, lazy, or irresponsible, or that whatever experiences they're having with their mental illness is self-induced. And remember that people can't just snap out of it. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have as much people suffering as we do now. So I hear family members say, oh, he's just lazy, he just doesn't want to work, he just need to get up and go to work. Nobody wants to suffer. And so if it was that easy for people to just snap out of whatever they're experiencing, we wouldn't have people struggling the way they are. Now, how do we cultivate good mental health and build resilience? So just a reminder, mental health is or emotional, psychological, spiritual, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to be able to adapt to changes. To explore resilience, we're going to borrow some concepts from neuroscience and from positive psychology. First, I want to say your brain is an organ. Just like your heart, just like your lung, your brain is also an organ. And we talk a lot about heart health, but we don't talk so much about brain health, even though we know that our brain is an organ. Our brain thrives under optimum conditions and contributes significantly to our mental health, so we want to take care of our brain. Also remember that your brain is plastic. It's very flexible. It's a flexible organ, and it has the ability to change. You change your brain all the time with everything you do, even by thinking. In fact, if you learned something new today, you would have connected 2 neurons that were never connected before, and that's a change in the brain. So we're going to get specific on what you could do. First of all, we talk about exercise. Oxygen is your brain's favorite food. And when you exercise, you increase blood flow to your brain, which brings a lot of oxygen. And research shows that when we think and feel better when we move. So the next time you're feeling down or discouraged or feeling a little bit depressed, take a brisk walk or go for a run or work out if you have your in-home gym. And I'm sure it's going to improve your mood. And this slide, I don't even need to talk about it because Marina just touched on all of that, and I really appreciated her for doing that. But healthy eating. So to boost your mental health, focus on eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, along with food rich in omega-3 fatty acid. So dark green leafy vegetables in particular are really good brain food. The nuts and seeds, legumes, beans, lentil are all excellent brain food. And a lot of us here have a plant-based diet, or majority plant-based diet, so you're already on the right track. Sleep well, so you can think well. Did you know that your brain literally take out the trash at night? You actually have a waste management system in your brain, the glymphatic system. And we know that modern life has interfered with our sleep hygiene. So to improve your mental health, there's some simple things that you can do. Establish a nighttime routine. So if it's going to bed at night every night, start doing that and try to stick closely to that time as possible. Stop using your electronic device at least an hour. Amen. Increase the time as you go along. So an hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, at least an hour before bedtime. And if you would consume caffeine, which I hope we don't, but if we do, try not to drink any caffeinated beverages after 2 p.m. In the day. And don't sleep with your TV or your lights on. Make the room dark. This one is very simple, and I know we often miss this because we have a very busy life and we hardly ever have time to connect. But we're social creatures, we're social beings. God created us social beings. So connect with people in your circle, connect with family, connect with church family and friends and co-workers. In fact, when we connect with others, we get a host of feel-good brain chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine. So the next time you're feeling down, reach out to someone. And it's so easy now to do that. We can just pick up our phone and call someone and talk to them. We're not living in the age where we'd have to write a letter or walk over to your neighbor, which would be nice for a face-to-face interaction. But if you're not able to do that, pick up your phone and talk to somebody. Next, we're gonna talk about managing stress, and this slide is just there with nothing on it because I was planning on asking you questions, but again, I won't interrupt your meal. So, stress brains don't function the same way, and we know that. When you're stressed, you release a lot of cortisol, and that cortisol floods your prefrontal cortex. And so your rational, your executive function part of the brain goes offline. And just your amygdala, your flight, freeze, your emotional brain kicks in. And what's happening when you're stressed, especially when you're experiencing chronic stress, your brain is saying, all the non-essentials we're going to put on pause. So sleeping, we're not going to deal with that right now. Digestion, we're going to put that on pause. Right now, we need to protect the body. And that's what's happening when you're experiencing excessive stress. Stress is good, though. It gets a bad rap. A lot of times we say avoid stress. But in this sinful world that we're living, think if you didn't have anxiety for some things, you'd probably just step out in the street without worried about something hitting you, or speed down the highway without worried about having an accident, or don't even study for an exam if you have an exam coming up. So some amount of stress, anxiety is helpful for functioning. It's not God's ideal, but it's helpful. So some ways that we can manage stress: exercise, play, and I intentionally put that on there because I know when we grow up, we stop playing. Playing is good for the brain. Gardening is good, praying, Bible study, mindfulness exercise, having your different hobbies. Talk to a trusted friend or family, somebody you know that you can rely on, somebody that can support you and help you through it. And slow down. I talked earlier about how busy life gets, and there's so much demand on us as we transition through life. But if we make everything a priority, nothing will be a priority. So slow down and spend time in nature. Go outside for a walk, even when it's cold. Bundle up. Go get some sunshine. Go outside for a walk and listen to good gospel Christian music that's edifying. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about positive psychology. We're going to highlight 4 things that are backed by research that we can use to improve our mental health: optimism, altruism, empathy, and gratitude. Cultivating optimism. Is a glass half full or half empty? We hear that question all the time. We all worry, right? But most times we worry about things that don't really happen. And Cornell University actually did a research on this and found that 85% of the things that we worry about never actually happen. And so the glass is indeed half full. We just sometimes have a hard time seeing it that way, especially when we're in whatever situation that we're in that seems gloomy. Now, is it possible to train your brain to be optimistic? Absolutely. Whenever we think positive thoughts, we strengthen the neural pathways for positivity and release feel-good brain chemicals like, again, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. So some things that you can do to train your brain to be more optimistic is notice good things when it happens. Don't just glance at it and move on, but really pause and process it. Spend time with optimistic people. Don't spend time around the Debbie Downers. Focus your time and your energy on people who are optimistic and positive. And then acknowledge the things that you can change and the things that you cannot. Recognize what's in your control and what's not in your control. And be intentional about replacing some of those negative thoughts to positive thoughts. Consciously think positive thoughts, practicing reframing, changing the negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And all of us have a cell phone. Almost all of us have a cell phone. And we walk around with a bunch of happy memories on our phone. So if you're feeling down, pull out your phone, scroll through your pictures, look at some of the good memories, some of the happy memories you have. I'm almost certain you're going to start feeling better when you go down memory lane, when you have some positive memories in there. Empathy. When we try to see things as others do, we cultivate more positive affiliated feelings and less divisiveness. We hear the story about the 3 little pigs. Have we ever considered the story from the wolf's perspective? That's empathy, right? So there's a guy on YouTube, his name is Alex Wolf. He actually told the story from the wolf's perspective. And the wolf was like, all I needed was a cup of sugar, but I had a cold and I sneezed, and the rest is history. So consider the story from the wolf's perspective. And then gratitude. It's good for you. It actually changes your brain. And research shows that people who regularly express gratitude have more activity in their prefrontal cortex and less activity in the impulse part of the brain. So you're able to think better, be less impulsive, and have better rational thoughts. So ways to express gratitude. Write a thank you note or text. Keep a gratitude journal. Start or end your day noting 3 things you are thankful for. Make a gratitude jar. The other one was a gratitude journal. And say thanks often. We don't do that a lot, but say thank you to show your gratitude. Practice gratitude because sometimes it's easy for us to identify the big things that we're grateful for. So we're grateful for a family, we're grateful for good health, we're grateful for friends, and sometimes, yes, those are important, but pausing to look on the smaller things in your life, things that you're grateful for. Man, this was a really good meal. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for this series that the church has put it on, or I'm grateful for the smile that I see on my mom's face or my friend's face, or that pet that I just got to play with. I'm grateful for those small things. So I had an activity for you to do, to write something down, something small that you're grateful for. But we're not going to do that, but I want you to think about it, and I want you to go home and start a gratitude jar. So write something small that you're grateful for, and practice this. Every day or every other day, write 3 small things that you're grateful for that you experience throughout the day. Put it in the jar, because some days when you're not feeling so optimistic and hopeful or encouraged, you can pull that jar out and go back in and look at some of those things that small things that you found you were grateful for. And then acts of kindness. We know that has a ripple effect. Being kind to others is good for your well-being. Did you know it's also contagious? Kindness is contagious, whether it's a large gesture or a small gesture. So every time you hold a door open for someone, or if something drops, you help them pick it up, or even telling someone their baby is cute, you're sending out feel-good chemicals out in the world so we can have that ripple effect of kindness. So plan something small, a small act of kindness. And Pastor Kelly actually started something similar a few weeks ago when he gave us those postcards to write, telling someone that we're thankful or grateful for them, or sending a kind word to someone and sending that out. So that's something that you could do on a regular basis to help your mental health and to help somebody else's mental health. So think of something small that you could do. Even if going home and sending a text, somebody you haven't talked to in a while, somebody you're concerned about across your mind, sending them a small text or a small favor, I'm sure will not only help you to feel better, but will also help them feel better. And be intentional about it. Don't just do it because Kayona said, okay, I need to write a text to somebody. Be really intentional about it. So just a quick refresher. We have more control over mental health and well-being than we realize. By taking care of our body with exercise, sleep, stress management, a healthy diet, we actually take care of our brain. And we take care of our minds by being with others and learning to activate that common neural pathway. And we can change our mindset to be more positive by being optimistic, empathetic, grateful, and kind. What I want to leave with you, I want you to think about the palm trees. Palm trees are strong and healthy and beautiful. They stand tall and people admire them. But did you know that palm trees must withstand very adverse conditions, such as storms and hurricanes? But they're flexible. They bend without breaking because they're resilient. Palm trees bend and rarely break during storms and even hurricane. They're very flexible and have a strong root system. Storms actually strengthen these trees. So when we think about resilience, we want to think about the sum of the experience. We've all have really difficult experiences that we've gone through. Some of us more extreme than others, but a lot of us were able to bounce back. This is often due to those positive factors in our lives that help us deal with stress from negative events. So resilience comes from a sum of all our experiences. Just because you've had certain adverse experiences does not make you destined to have physical or mental health problems. So we want to remember that the positive outweighs the negative. If you forget everything I said today, remember to ask for help if you need it. And I did leave some handouts out here and some refrigerator magnets with the crisis and suicide hotline 988, which is amazing. Before, we had a very long 1-800 number to call if you needed somebody to talk to and if you need help. Now they're treating it as an emergency. So you know how you call 911 for medical emergency and crises? You call 988 for mental health emergencies. Isn't that amazing? Easy number to remember. And then, so ask for help if you need it, and reach out to others if you are concerned about them. And be intentional about reaching out. These resources are also at the back on the table, and these are just some local resources and national resources. So we have the suicide hotline. Riverwood is a community mental health center in Niles. Woodlands is in Cass County and Berrien County. Pivotal is in St. Joe County, and Corwell Health, this is your mental health line that you could call if somebody needs inpatient psych. And then the SAMHSA hotline, and Michigan has a disaster distress line and some other resources there for you. Any questions for me? Wow, all right. Okay.
Give me an example of a spiritual factor as a cause for mental illness, and also why is it better to sleep in the dark?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but we had a presentation a few weeks ago, and they talk about melatonin in your body, and that when you sleep in the dark, it increases the processing of melatonin in your system. And Linda probably knows that better than I do and can explain, or Morena, but it has some connection with melatonin in your body for the dark. And what was your first question?
The spiritual factors.
Spiritual factors. Yeah. So God is our creator, and he knows our body better than we do. Having believing in God, I won't say something that you believe in, because we're all Christian here, but having a God who you can look to as your creator, who can take you, does actually increase and improve your mental health. People research, and I know we throw research out there a lot, but research does actually show that people who believe in God tend to have better mental health, because you have someone that you can go to when you're struggling and when you have problems. Lack of, yes. Yes. We have some more questions. You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a cousin that's in Atlanta, and she is dealing with depression, serious depression, and I don't know what to do. I've given her the 988 hotline number, and I tried to get her out. It's hard for me from here to try to encourage her while she's there. But do you have any other strategies that I can use to help her deal with that? She just won't budge. She's not eating. Just the typical depression signs and symptoms.
Yeah, so SAMHSA did a survey, and the number one thing that people wish they had when they're struggling with a mental illness is social connectedness. But sometimes it's hard for them to reach out. And so I would probably start with having people reaching out to her to actually go to her, because sometimes it's hard for her to get up and go to someone.
Yeah, and we my cousins that are down there, they go to her house, knock on the door, she won't answer the door, just shuts us out entirely.
Yeah, that's hard. I would start with praying, and I know it sounds cliche, but it actually works. So praying and praying specific prayers. And, you're asking God for help. You're doing your part, and there's nothing else that you can do. You've done everything that you can, and so you leave it in God's hand and you pray specific prayers. Additionally, if there are any community mental health centers in her area, right now there's a lot of peer support in community mental health center. And peer supports are individuals who have lived experience of substance use and mental health, and they're in recovery. And a lot of them are able to reach people who we otherwise couldn't reach because they have that lived experience. So connect them, or if you know of a community mental health center that you could reach out to and ask them to try and connect with her. Yes.
Have you ever dealt with traumatic brain injury, like
So I also, okay, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. The last part of it.
Have you ever dealt with vets that have traumatic brain injuries?
I'm a social worker, so that's out of my scope of practice.
Okay.
But I also worked in a medical hospital, and I work closely with a psychiatrist who works with people with TBI. And we do know, of course, clearly it's a brain injury, so it's going to affect their behaviors, their thinking, their thought process.
Now, how about, there's some medications that can actually cause problems too, Prescription meds.
Cause what kind of problems?
Different, like depression or other, symptoms, that type of thing.
Yep, that is true. There's some medication that increases your depression. So we strongly encourage that you start, depending on the severity of your mental illness, you start with lifestyle changes and self-care. I'm not telling anyone here to stop your medication if you're on medication. Please talk to your doctor if you're on medication. But if you feel like you're struggling with depressive or anxious thoughts, start with maybe changing your lifestyle. And we talk about some of the things that you can do. Self-care, taking care of yourself, and be intentional about that. And if none of that, reaching out to people, praying, if none of that helps, then you want to talk to a mental health provider to see what help you can get.
My daughter struggles with depression and anxiety a lot. And one of the, you talked about how just basic hygiene kind of goes out the window. And she's had a lot of that struggle. She also struggles with anorexia. And I've insisted that she continue going to the dentist for her regular checkups, because while she's not able to really take care of herself in that way, I really want to make sure that we stay on top of things in her oral health. But she's struggled because the dentist, the hygienist that she's been seeing has been very pushy about, you have to brush your teeth, you have to brush your teeth. And she's tried to explain to them the struggles that she's had, but it's, you have to brush your teeth. So I talked to my hygienist and told her some of the struggles, and my daughter tried my hygienist, and she, it was much better. My hygienist came up with ideas instead of, oh, it's just this or that, and trying to throw medication or something at it. The hygienist said, well, let's try a softer toothbrush, because she's got a lot of sensory issues with it too. And so it helped. But how can we, as a parent, or my daughter as the person struggling with it, how can we educate professionals who are having a hard time understanding that it may not be what you think it is? It's not. I've learned from, I'm a health professional myself, but I've learned from dealing with my daughter that what I would normally use doesn't always work, and what works this time may not work next time. So how can we help educate other health professionals in those types of situations? Because when my daughter talked to her counselor said, if you ever find a dentist or hygienist that understands this, please let me know, because I have at least 3 people off the top of my head who have the same struggle.
Wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to try to explain that, or carries a holistic mind-body, spirit type of approach that we take in serving people in the medical field? Unfortunately, we don't. So I would encourage you to start with educating yourself. And even though people struggle with mental illness, it doesn't mean that they're clueless. They know what can help them. Sometimes they just need a little bit of help. Sometimes they're so deep in their struggle that they really don't, and they need somebody to come alongside and walk with them. But start with education. And once you are aware, then you can be her advocate and say, this, I've talked to her, this is what I know, and this is what I'd like to do. And sometimes you have to be a persistent advocate to get them to listen. Does that help? Okay.
Hi, you
Hi.
had some awesome information, and I had kind of a two-part question. Have you done social services outside of the United States? Have you done social services, or what you do here, have you done it outside of the country?
No, my background is actually in accounting before social work.
Okay. My next question is, and I don't know how far spread your care goes, but something I've recently experienced with my doctor is the Geno test, where they run a swab, and through this test, it can tell them, it runs it into 3 categories. The ones that my body will not react to and could be harmful or suicidal, ones that just have no effect at all, and the ones that would be the most benefit. My question concerning that was how widely spread to the average person who is struggling with this and those that are tired of being lab rats. Do you think this is awareness that this resource is out there?
Good question. So not a lot of people know about the Geno test. And the thing is, it's very expensive. And a lot of insurance will not cover it. It's great. And when we talk about how far we've come in mental health, because before your doctor would do trial and error when they're trying to find medications that will work for you. And so they'll try you on something for a while, and this doesn't work, they stop it. Of course, after giving it sufficient time, and they try something else. With this test, they can just determine what, like you said, the probability of this medication that's going to work for you. That's great, and that's progress in mental health, but it's very expensive. And so a lot of people don't even know about it, one, because we don't talk about it, and then because of the cost that's associated with it. People can't afford it, and a lot of the insurance companies won't pay for it.
Would you help me understand the difference between depression, manic depression, and bipolar disorder?
Wow. Can we talk about that after?
Okay.
It's
I
going to
didn't know if it
take
was an
just
easy one or not.
more than just being up here. Long and short of it, there's a manic so you ask about depression and manic depressive. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and then bipolar disorder.
Okay, so the short answer of that is the manic episode that's in there. And then there's hypomanic and mania. So hypomanic, feeling really, really down, just really depressed, just not motivated to do anything. They're not engaging. And then the mania, where they are going days without sleeping, and they're super energized, and this grandiose kind of experience that they're having, and feeling like they're larger than life and they can do anything. That's the manic episode. But we could talk more about that afterwards.